And now I'd like to invite Christina Theodoraki from Toulouse Business School. Christina, please.
Hello, everybody. I'll try to share my presentation. Will you please let me know if you can see it? Okay, this works perfectly.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much for the kind invitation, and I'm really so glad to be here in the workshop series because actually we can engage in this critical perspective of the entrepreneurial ecosystem discussion. So trying to advance our knowledge about this topic. And actually today I'm going to present an ongoing project entitled Entrepreneurial Sourcing in the Pre-incubation Ecosystem. And even though I presented, the credit should go to our doctoral student, Andrea Nana, who is developing the PhD in this topic and co-supervised by my colleague Eric Michael Laviolette, who is associate professor in TBS Business School, and myself, Christina Theodoraki, assistant professor in Toulouse Business School in the southwest of France. So actually today I will follow to describe this topic in a general outline, so I will follow the research context, contextualize why this topic is important to study entrepreneurial ecosystems, the literature review we followed, the research methods, some first findings I would like to share, and contributions, implications for research and practice, but also some limitations and what we call for future research. So before I tell you, I share with you what we have done in this study, I would like to anchor it and say why it is important to look at it in this perspective. So from my research, I studied my PhD, the first PhD on entrepreneurial ecosystem in 2013. And actually, I identified some observations that were leading to the reflection of the PhD we have today. So the first observation is that incubators are ecosystem intermediaries. And we saw in the previous workshop a presentation highlighting that incubators are intermediaries. So incubators are the bridge that link tenants with the external environment. Also, incubators are service providers that need to create strong ties with ecosystem actors to provide a high quality service to tenants. So actually in my research, I found that incubators is a comfortable level of analysis that allows us to study entrepreneurial ecosystem because we're situated in a direct service and support to entrepreneurs, but also we are linked during the incubation process with several ecosystem actors that can be, for example, funders, policymakers, universities, or even other support organizations. The second observation we have in my research is that we follow also and we engage in the literature that suggests to study the entrepreneurial ecosystem from a process-based perspective. We can cite here the work of Spiegel and Harrison in 2018. And also in my research, I saw that in the process to study the ecosystem, we find that this is a complex, but also evolving strategic dynamics that change and evolve during the incubation process. For example, I shared also a screenshot, a figure that I have developed, trying to evaluate the strategic dynamics evolution during the incubation process. And we see that we have different strategies when we're in selection process, different when in the resource provision or the network access. So we see that we have evolving different players, but also creative sub-ecosystems. And the focus here, we're trying to use this, this setting for the study we're going to present in a few minutes. The third focus, we see that in the literature, we have a special focus on the incubator effectiveness, all the support tools, what is the performance, what is the outcomes, or even how ecosystem become efficient and performant. However, we have so many questions about the outcomes, but we lack a consensus on the incubation mechanism effects on the incubation performance and the ecosystem as a whole. So from this observation, we conclude that we have a lack of knowledge of the upstream incubation process and also the input when we want to have improved incubator performance, not only focusing in the outcomes, but also trying to explore the inputs. So actually this leads to the current study I'm going to present. And the context is that we observe that we have a multiplication of incubators and different support tools. We see incubators, we see accelerators, we see workplaces. So this multiplication of factors will have an impact on the pre-incubation process. We also see in my research that we develop co-petition practices in the pre-incubation process just because we have a multiplication of all these ecosystem actors. And also today, the incubators face the following challenge, which is to get a steady flow of tenants to increase the quality, but also to improve the incubator performance and the outcomes. So the need to today, based on this context, is that incubators need to know what is happening in the pre-incubation black box, and what we're trying to understand with this research. So the literature review and to develop the theoretical gap and research question, we observe that the pre-incubation practices is a literature that is under-theorized and fragmented. So we need to understand the pre-incubator practices, which is very important for the incubator processes, incubation practices, and performance. So we need to study the pre-incubation practices by an ecosystem and a process approach, because incubators engage several ecosystem actors. So we're trying to present in a figure how we develop our research question. We see that literature say that selection process and the selection criteria, the screening, will have an impact on incubator performance. But as we have a multiplication of factors, we see that some incubators were trying to lightening the selection criteria so that they have at least some tenants in the incubator. We also see that the incubators engage with several ecosystem actors and multi-channel of processes. And here they create some co-petition dynamics and strategies with other ecosystem actors. So our research question in this study is, how do incubators detect and select their tenants in the pre-incubation ecosystem? In order to respond to this research question, we're trying to do a comparative literature review by combining the work on the pre-incubation processes and practices, but also we're trying to better understand what is the sourcing process as studying in the management science. This comparative literature review will allow us to define and frame what we'll name and define as entrepreneurial sourcing that we'll see and we'll test in the incubator context. So the research methodology we follow is a single and exploratory case study with a regional incubator here in Occitania region, which is called NUBO. The data was performed this year, and we follow an ecosystem and a process-based approach to observe how the potential tenants are detected and selected by the incubator. We conducted 18 interviews. We combined participant and non-participant observation and secondary data from website and reports of the incubator. And we provide an analysis of an inductive reasoning and an analysis with in vivo software. So our first finding suggests that the entrepreneurial sourcing is presented as a recruitment process following human resources recruitment studies. We see that we can distinguish two main phases. The first one is the identification of the tenants. And then once we have identified the tenants, potential tenants, we can proceed with the screening and the selection of tenants to start the incubation. So if we go deeper in these results, we see that we have identified three main sourcing practices, which is the scouting, prospecting, and opening for applications. However, we added a fourth one, which is the e-sourcing, And actually, this is a transversional sourcing practice, which includes all of the above, scouting, prospecting, and opening for applications, but is used in an online basis using digital tools. So if we're going deeper in the scouting is when we have different intensities, when ecosystem actors were going to reorient potential tenants to the incubator. For example, when we see a tenant, we see go to the incubator, and this is called the channeling. Or the ecosystem actor can filter and reorient only the projects that fit to the selection criteria of the incubator, which is called matchmaking. Or even translating is when the ecosystem actor is going to work with the potential tenant to coach the project in order to best fit to the incubator selection criteria. The prospecting process is when the incubator staff will going to engage with ecosystem partners to identify potential tenants in an intermediate, direct, or collective manner. Way. For example, a collective way when they engage together to do, for example, some events with ecosystem partners and where we can identify some potential tenants. Finally, a very traditional sourcing mechanism is the opening for applications. Incubators once or twice a year a call for application for spontaneous application for potential tenants. And finally, they can use it in a physical or online through social media way. Once the identification 5 steps. First, we have the file review when we review the applications. Then the incubator staff engage in a training to prepare the potential tenants to the pre-incubation phase in order to arrive to the evaluation. When here the evaluation is a pre-selection made by incubator staff. For example, incubator staff we're going to evaluate the files and prepare to pass to the audition and eligibility list. The eligibility list is when the incubator administration is going to check if the potential tenants fit to the incubator. And then the audition is when the incubator will open this recruitment process to ecosystem members. We have the pitch of potential tenants in front of incubator manager, incubator staff, incubator administration, but also ecosystem actors that are going to participate to a collegial jury. Based on this process, we're going to have an exit. If the project don't succeed, we can have a final admission to the incubation process or have a reorientation to another ecosystem partner. So our study also provides some important screening criteria based on the importance. The most important one is the skill of the tenants, the entrepreneurial skills or the skills related to the project. The second one is the technological and innovative potential of the project. And finally, at last we found the entrepreneurial resources, which is normal because even though the project lack of resources, the incubator will be there to help the project and provide the resources. Our results also allow to schematize a little bit the pre-incubation ecosystem. And actually we see that we have connecting actors, that we distinguish actors, but also processes as the pre-incubation process. Our results show that we have 2 main categories of actors, the idea brokers and the technology of innovation brokers. But also we can add a third category, which is related to the context about the innovative environment. Actually, if we wanted to translate what is the idea brokers, this is related to actors who engage in the idea generation. For example, we can have programs, co-working spaces that trying to help the idea generation that can be transformed to potential entrants. Technology or innovation brokers are organizations that are more focused in the technology transfer and more focusing in the finding, selling licenses of technology in the industry, or even sometimes trying to find a potential tenant to transform the technology in a viable project. So this can lead also to a sourcing of potential tenants. And then we find the innovative environment, which is replaced by the quadruple helix framework, that we have a university, industry, government, and civil society that can create a supportive entrepreneurial environment and enhance other tenants. So this is a representation of the pre-incubation ecosystem. So finally, if we want to translate all that into definitions, we see that the entrepreneurial sourcing is defined as a process of practices that are undertaken by incubators in close collaboration with ecosystem actors in the pre-incubation ecosystem, whose objective is to regularly identify and screen in volume qualified tenants corresponding to their criteria. We also provide a first definition of the pre-incubation ecosystem. We consider that the pre-incubation ecosystem is a physical, but also a virtual place where potential tenants are self-created or created by the entities that compose the pre-incubation ecosystem, and exchanged between actors based on interpersonal and interorganizational multilateral relationships supported by sharing expertise and information. So this research provides contributions at the theoretical level because we provide a conceptualization of what we name the entrepreneurial sourcing. We update the 3D of screening criteria, and we highlighted the need to study as sub-ecosystems, and we propose to study the pre-incubation ecosystem. We also provide methodological contributions because we study the entrepreneurial sourcing as a pragmatic process for detecting and selecting potential tenants, but also we adopt an ecosystem and a process approach to study the pre-incubation practices. So, what we learn from all that? What is the managerial implications of this study? First of all, we update the screening criteria so that we can allow to potential tenants to better prepare their application and optimize their performances to the pre-incubation process. We will also provide insight for all the ecosystem actors in order to position themselves in terms of complementarity that can lead to win-win synergy of action between ecosystem players. Also, we provide insights to incubator managers that wish to improve the incubator performance, but not only focusing on the outcomes, but also trying to optimize the inputs and so their pre-incubation practices. So lastly, before to conclude this presentation, I would like to share some limitations and call for future research. Our limits is related to the qualitative protocol. So we have the limit of generalization of our results because we focused in one region and one incubator. And also this study, we don't provide the purpose of entrepreneurial sourcing practices. So in future research, we called to study more the entrepreneurial sourcing antecedents, what is the purpose of sourcing practices, but also to compare the similarities and differences of sourcing practices in different types of incubators, for example, social incubators or economic development incubators and so on, but also in different contexts, for example, France or UK or European support ecosystems and other contexts. So thank you very much for your attention. Again, thanks for Andrea and Anna, the PhD student who is working in this topic, and we'll be happy to share to continue the discussion or respond to the questions. And
Thank you very much, Christina. Yep, we're just a little bit short of time, but if anyone has got questions or comments or sort of similar studies in different contexts, yep, Muskim raised a hand. So
yeah,
yep,
thank you, thank you, Christina. Always thought-provoking and insightful presentations and research. You know, incubators, you mentioned co-working spaces, accelerators, sometimes IT parks or other clusters. So there's so many variety of those incubator type support mechanisms to entrepreneurs. And some of them may have, I would assume, and also in terms of private, public, business, university, government supported, and so on. So there's so much in there. What would be your message to policymakers for regional development in particular? What type of incubator programs they would want to support? Of course, supporting entrepreneurs, but also just making sure that it translates into the regional economic development.
Thank you very much, Maxim. This is a great question because actually concretely, the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the force and the power of the entrepreneurial ecosystem is based on the diversity. So should we foster the multiplication of actors but have an impact, or trying to only target the incubators or now the accelerators? So I think the one possible response is to increase the diversity. However, what is very important in policymakers, and I think what we see also that policymakers engage in this reflection of ecosystem, and I found very important to shift from individual actors to an ecosystem mindset. What we're trying probably to engage and support is no longer act as isolated actors. For example, trying to foster one industry actor by actor, but probably engage in the overall ecosystem development. Why I say so? For example, if we have a shift in the ecosystem mindset, we think as a whole. However, when we are individual actors, every actor of the ecosystem will like to have another support tool. For example, in my research, I saw that the Chamber of Commerce wanted to have, for example, their own incubator to benefit from the emerge. Some development policymakers wanted to have their own incubator. So this multiply by thinking individually, actor by actor. I think we have to find an holistic mindset and improving, probably not multiplying all these actors, because today we are in a maturity of the ecosystem. We have probably too many, and we find every time more and more tools. For example, we have clusters, we're giving money in clusters, then we have incubators or academic incubators. Here in France, we take the money from academic incubators to give it to societies of technology transfer. So we see new tools appearing, we shift budget, but we pollute the ecosystem as a whole. So I think we should think together in a holistic ecosystem view.
Thank you, Christina. That's really interesting. Aaron?
Yes, hi. I just have one quick question about the selection, because this is also what you mentioned in the paper. And because here in Munich, I can see that actually the real value is being generated not on the level of the accelerators, but before, in selection for certain study programs that are on top or something like this. And what we're wondering always is, how do we select students for this? Because do we select the students that are already almost there? So do we select the best students who would probably found something without our help? Or do we select students where we think our program has the highest impact? And I guess the same question is true for the accelerators, for the incubators, for everything, because I mean, what is our goal as all of these policy tools that you just mentioned, that we discussed? Is it to, well, push the best and put our nice logos, obviously, then on the homepage, because the best obviously are successful. So we can put a logo on the homepage and say, hey, they went to our accelerator or whatever. Or do we push the ones where we think, hey, there we make a difference, and they're not there yet, so we can't put less logos, obviously, because they're less likely to be successful, but the impact is higher. So I think this is a very interesting question that maybe you can also touch upon in the accelerator question. I don't know what your take is on that.
I find very, very interesting question. And actually, the idea is accelerators should are more important. They come after when the project is well established, or probably the effort should be also in the beginning. And we also see in research that the selection criteria you were raising, the criteria, if we have strict selection criteria, pick only the best, so we ensure that the outcome will be the best of the best. So actually in the beginning of the incubators, when we didn't have a lot of support actors, they could increase the barriers of the selection criteria. to increase the performance. However, today we can no longer, in ecosystems that are mature, we can no longer have that. Here in France, we can also sometimes find incubators that don't they have space for free and they don't have enough projects. So actually, where is the efficiency of this ecosystem? So lower the selection criteria or trying to improve the mechanism by engaging the ecosystem. And actually today, Andre Nana, he's working on that, how we can increase the pool of tenants and their quality. So in order to increase the selection criteria, we can no longer do that, but how we can engage in a dialogue with ecosystem partners, so the ecosystem trying also to educate and improve the projects, so we have better qualities and more pool of projects that can maintain efficiently the ecosystem. And we work and we believe that this is something we continue to work on.
Yeah, brilliant, Christina.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Christina. This is just kind of an opening up really interesting thoughts. So while Jonathan and Christina are here, I just pick up one really interesting question from the chat box. There may not be one answer, but just as both of you are sort of talking about different contexts. Question from Andy Nubo from Indonesia. It's a big question. Any comments? Is there any comments about developing ecosystem entrepreneur in developing country? It's maybe there's no one answer, but Jonathan mentioned some sort of work in different part of the world. Have you got any sort of insights about using policy concept, economic concept in very different institutional context? And Christina's sort of work from Accelerator, Incubator, any insights, observation by applying very different, again, context? A few very quick answer, if you could.
Yeah, we applied the ecosystem framework in Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai in neighboring Thailand. And it seemed to work okay, applying the concept. You're just starting from a different level. So there are more bottlenecks, but we identified access to finance and access to advice as two key issues. And then the other really key issue was getting the research that Thailand is doing in really advanced S-curve sectors into the world of the economy, into the market, and making better use of science parks and research labs to basically put products that have been invented into firms and onto the international market. So we could use the concept, and it was interesting.
Just a quick thought is, thank you very much for raising also the differences about developing context. And what we also see in ecosystem is there's no a magical receipt, is trying to adapt it to the specific context, country, but also region, specificities, but also the evolution and the maturity of the ecosystem. That means that when we are in an emerging ecosystem, we don't have all these actors. Probably we should engage in building the actors and the infrastructure of the ecosystem, and then trying to optimize the connection and process between them. And also what is very important for policymakers also is that building today an entrepreneurial ecosystem is engaging in a long-term strategy. Today, the problem is that we have short policy that change, and each one wants to be attached probably to a new tool. And we have this multiplication of different support. So probably engage in a long-term strategy and improving the tools we have.
Okay, well, thanks very much to both of you, Jonathan Potter and Christina Theodoraki, for the great first session.